February 1979. Most winters break spirits slowly, but this one struck Britain twice in just 10 days. First a blizzard that paralysed roads, then a second, even fiercer storm before the country could recover. Uncollected rubbish clogged freezing streets, families rationed coal, and classrooms turned colder than playgrounds. As children scraped frost from windows, no one imagined a double disaster winter like this. How did Britain endure when the snow refused to stop? January 1979. In the weeks before the first blizzard, fragile Britain was already slipping into discomfort. Rubbish lined the pavements, spilling from torn black bags and battered bins. The smell lingered in the cold, a constant reminder that the dustmen were on strike. Some streets were almost impassable, with heaps of waste edging out into the road. Children picked their way to school past broken glass and sodden cardboard, boots crunching over frozen debris. Inside, the cold followed them. Most houses relied on a single coal fire, usually in the front room. Families crowded together, blankets draped over knees, while the rest of the house stayed icy. Coal deliveries had slowed to a trickle because of industrial action. Some parents rationed the scuttle, trying to make the fire last as long as possible. Bedrooms were often colder than outside, with thick ice furring the inside of the window panes. Each morning, children scraped at the frost with their fingernails, watching their breath fog in the dim light. Getting ready for school meant layers, vests, jumpers, scarves, and then a coat, often worn indoors and out. Coats stayed on in classrooms that offered little relief. Radiators, if they worked at all, gave off a faint metallic warmth. Most children kept their coats and gloves on during lessons, hands stiff and red. Teachers tried to keep spirits up, but chalk snapped easily in the cold and ink froze in the wells. School milk arrived half frozen, the foil lids domed with ice. Some children tapped the tops and popped out a plug of frozen cream to suck on during break. At home, the routine was shaped by scarcity. Baths were rare and water was kept tepid to save on heating. Hot meals meant hope, tinned soup, bread toasted on the fire, stews stretched with potatoes. The air always smelled faintly of damp wool and coal smoke. Evenings brought the family together around the hearth, hands outstretched to the flames, feet wrapped in old socks. For children, the world shrank to a few warm feet of carpet, a comic or toy in hand, and the distant sound of the wind rattling the windows. Weather forecasts on the radio hinted at worse to come. But for now, the hardship was ordinary, a quiet, bone-deep cold that settled in every corner. Each day, it grew a little harder to ignore. Mornings begin with the clatter of the letterbox and the low hum of Radio 2 in the kitchen. Children sit at the table, hands wrapped around half-frozen bottles of school milk, foil tops bulging with ice. The taste of cold milk mixes with the metallic tang from the radiators when they work at all. Gloves are always damp, wool stiffening as it dries overnight on the fireguard, only to be pulled on again, still chilly, for the walk to school. The television schedule is a comfort, a steady drumbeat in an uncertain world. Blue Peter comes on after tea, its presenters building model igloos out of sugar cubes, as if preparing everyone for what might come. Grange Hill's theme tune echoes through living rooms, and Action Man figures stage battles on frost-slick window ledges. Comics like Whizzer and Chips lie spread on the rug, pages curling from the heat of the fire. There are only 3 channels, and the news seems to come around faster in winter, each bulletin warning of severe conditions ahead. Playtime is a test of imagination and endurance. Tea trays double as sledges, and coal shovels become prized racing equipment. Anoraks are handed down, patched at the elbows, zips stuck half open. Wellies leak, so feet are wrapped in carrier bags before being pushed in, the plastic crinkling with every step. Fingers burn from the cold, then tingle painfully as they warm again by the fire. The air always smells of wet wool and smoke, a scent that clings to everything. Evenings mean gathering close to the hearth, toes pressed against the fender, comics and toys within reach. The only light comes from the TV and the orange glow of the coal. Children watch the snow in Blue Peter's garden and wonder if it will come to their street. Every forecast sounds more serious, but it is hard to imagine anything worse than the daily chill, the scraping of ice from the inside of the glass, and the endless hunt for warmth. Still, there is a quiet excitement, a sense that something big is coming, and everyone waits for the first real sign. The first sign of trouble arrived with the morning commute. Winds from the southeast whipped snow sideways across roads and fields, blinding drivers and swallowing familiar landmarks. By breakfast, flakes were thickening, clinging to every surface, and the city's arteries began to clog. The A1, the main route between England and Scotland, ground to a halt near Doncaster and Lincolnshire. Lorries jackknifed, cars crawled, then stopped altogether. Engines idled until tanks ran dry. By noon, hundreds of vehicles stood abandoned, their owners trudging away through knee-deep drifts that grew by the hour. Snowfall topped 30 centimeters in places, but it was the wind that turned inconvenience into chaos. Gusts reached 50 miles per hour, sculpting drifts up to 3 meters high across open ground. Police closed major routes, waving off would-be travelers and urging stranded families to stay put. Some drivers spent the night in their cars, wrapped in coats and blankets, headlights dimmed by the relentless swirl. Emergency services struggled to keep up. Ambulances slid sideways or got stuck, their crews forced to walk the final stretch to reach patients. Gritters and plows, already short-staffed by strike action, fell behind as the snow overwhelmed every effort. By mid-afternoon, word spread that schools would close early. Parents braved the storm to collect their children, shuffling home against the wind, faces pinched and red with cold. Power lines sagged under the weight of ice and snow. In some neighborhoods, the lights flickered, then died. Families gathered in the one room with a working fire, listening to the radio for updates as dusk fell. The world outside disappeared behind a wall of white. For many, the journey home became an ordeal measured in hours, not minutes, as Britain's infrastructure shuddered under the weight of a storm that showed no sign of letting up. School closures came through the kitchen radio, Radio 2's familiar jingle interrupted by a long list of towns and villages. Children pressed close, hoping to hear their school's name, then bursting into cheers or groans. For a moment, the world belonged to them. No lessons, no homework, just a day to claim from the grown-ups. Outside, the snow had transformed every street into a playground. Tea trays, baking sheets, and battered coal shovels became sledges. Children raced each other down hills that were usually just patches of grass or rough tarmac. The best runs always ended in a heap at the bottom, laughter echoing off garden fences. Scarves flapped, wellies leaked, and gloves soaked through within minutes, but nobody cared. Frozen fingers burned as they packed snow for the perfect snowball, launching them at friends, siblings, and sometimes the postman gamely trudging by. Back gardens turned into construction sites for igloos and snowforts. Walls rose from bricks of packed snow only to collapse and be rebuilt, better each time. Hand-me-down anoraks, patched and faded, offered little protection. Some children wrapped carrier bags around their socks, hoping to keep dry, but the cold always found its way in. Faces glowed red, noses dripped, and every breath made clouds in the air. When the cold became too much, children retreated indoors, boots and coats left in puddles by the door. The fire was the heart of the house, drawing everyone close. Whizzer and Chip's comics lay scattered on the rug, pages curling from the heat. 3 television channels showed Blue Peter's snow scenes and Nationwide's news bulletins, but the real excitement was outside, waiting for the next adventure. Evenings meant telling stories about the day's exploits, comparing bruises and near misses, and planning tomorrow's races. The storm outside felt like a gift, a rare chance for freedom and invention. For a few days, the world was smaller, brighter, and entirely their own. Milk floats, usually silent at dawn, were left behind as milkmen strapped crates to sledges and trudged through waist-high snow. Some carried bottles in baskets, knocking on doors to deliver what little they could. Postmen swapped bicycles for boots, hauling sacks over their shoulders, determined to finish the round even if it took all day. In some villages, nurses borrowed skis to reach the sick and elderly, weaving between drifts where ambulances could not pass. At the corner shop, a handwritten sign read, "1 loaf per customer, please." Bread was stacked behind the counter, and the shopkeeper watched the tally, making sure there was enough for each family. Neighbors gathered to shovel paths, forming lines to dig out cars or clear a route to the main road. Community halls opened their doors, offering tea and a place to warm up for anyone stranded or cold. Children were sent to check on older neighbors, carrying flasks of soup or a spare loaf. Every journey, every delivery became an act of quiet heroism. Through these small, determined efforts, the backbone of daily life held firm, even as the storm threatened to break it. Slush filled the gutters and pooled at every crossing. Boots sank into icy water, soaking through to the skin. The snow that had once blanketed the streets in silence now revealed piles of rubbish, half-frozen and glistening in the weak sun. Parents dragged themselves back to work, shoulders hunched, eyes on the forecast. Teachers opened classroom windows to air out the damp, then shut them quickly against the chill that still lingered. Children trudged to school through grey puddles, the excitement of snow replaced by the mess it left behind. Coal was running low in many homes, and the queue at the corner shop grew longer each morning. Milk arrived late, if at all. Weather bulletins on the radio warned of more snow, but few believed it. After so much disruption, people clung to the hope that the worst had passed. Yet the air felt heavy, and every slip on the pavement was a reminder that winter was not finished. The brief thaw offered little comfort, only a pause to catch breath before the next blow. Fatigue set in, quiet and deep, as Britain waited for whatever would come next. Wind battered the country with a force that had not been felt in years. By dawn, the snow returned, heavier and more relentless than before. Roads that had only just reopened disappeared again, swallowed under white walls that grew higher by the hour. Drifts towered over hedges and garden gates, some reaching well above a man's head. The A1, Britain's main north-south artery, was once again paralysed. Lorries and cars vanished beneath the snow, their shapes barely visible, engines silenced, drivers long since rescued or forced to abandon their vehicles. Railways ground to a halt. Trains stood frozen on the tracks, carriages empty and dark. In some places, rails vanished completely, buried under sweeping banks of snow blown in by winds that topped 50 miles per hour. Stations sat deserted, clocks ticking in unheated halls, waiting for a service that would not come. The landscape felt frozen in time. Villages disappeared behind curtains of drifting snow. For days, some communities became islands, cut off from the world except by radio signal. Milk and bread ran out. The only sound was the wind, rattling windows and piling snow against doors. No gritting lorries arrived. The men who drove them were on strike, and the roads remained treacherous and untouched. Inside these isolated pockets, time seemed to stretch. Families counted candles and coal, rationed food, and waited for news. The outside world faded to a rumor, and each day brought a new layer of silence. The blizzard did not just blanket the land, it severed it, leaving thousands stranded, watching the snow climb higher with every gust. Nights stretched on, heavy and silent, as the wind pressed snow against the doors and windows. The thrill of adventure faded. Children lay awake, listening to their parents' voices, low and tense, discussing what was left in the larder and how long the coal would last. Each day, meals grew simpler, bread with dripping, soup thinned with water, the last of the potatoes carefully counted. The fire in the front room was kept small, coal added sparingly, everyone huddled close in jumpers and coats. By evening, the house felt smaller, shadows flickering on the walls, the air thick with worry. Arguments flared over small things, a missing glove, who got the last mug of tea, whose turn it was to fetch water from the tap outside. Cabin fever set in. Siblings snapped at each other, tempers frayed by boredom and cold. The outside world was unreachable, and even the radio seemed distant, its music and news muffled by the storm. For children, the snow was no longer a playground. Parents warned them away from the ponds, now glazed with ice and tempting but dangerous. Stories began to drift in, of sheep trapped in drifts, barns collapsed under the weight of snow, farmers losing whole flocks overnight. Some families learned of neighbors stranded just a few miles away, unreachable by road or phone. The sense of isolation deepened, and the line between excitement and fear blurred. In those long, dark hours, survival became a quiet, shared effort, a test not of strength, but of patience and hope. Britain's double blizzard winter showed how quickly everyday life can unravel. When systems fail, then fail again. Today, as extreme weather grows more common, the lessons of 1979 press harder. Survival depends on community, not convenience. Memory lingers in the stories we share, shaping how we face the next crisis, together or alone. Where were you in February 1979 when the snow returned? Share your memory below and subscribe to help preserve lived history.